This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
The views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of WPSL. However, you are encouraged to like and share it on Facebook. And you might as well subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, because this is the African American Scene, presented each week by Howard Insurance and hosted by Rudy Howard.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Always glad to be with you here on a Wednesday night. I think we have a few things going on here, for sure. And we had the announcement last night that Nancy Pelosi is going full bore on an impeachment investigation. How about that? And I would also say to you that the text of the telephone discussion between Ukraine and President Trump has been released. And I looked it up and I got various excerpts from it today on the internet and read some of it myself. And it is very interesting. And I know there's some of you out here that will never, ever accept that it's an issue. But I do have one burning question before I get into the topics that I have for tonight. When does your conservatism, let me correct that. Let me make a different statement. Does your conservatism outweigh your faith and your belief in America? Does it? If you believe in the American idea and you believe in your faith, is that a conflict with your conservatism? I would love to hear what you have to say about that, because I have thoughts about that. But anyway, the transcript that was released today seems to indicate that there was a discussion that took place. And was there any direct requests from the president in a quid pro quo? No. But to me, that doesn't matter. And if you recall Michael Cohen's testimony, he said President Trump rarely, if ever, asks you to do anything directly. He makes suggestions and gives hints, and you understand what he's saying and you react accordingly. Sounds a little bit like The Godfather to me. Cliff and I was talking before we came on. That's what The Godfather did. He didn't say go out and necessarily kill somebody. He just made a suggestion that something had to be taken care of.
Vinny's getting a little bit of a liability.
Yeah, right, exactly. So what I want to know by now, if you're alive, you had listened to the radio today, I want to know from you if what the president did bothers you at all. Is what he did impeachable? And if it doesn't bother you, why is it okay? And I don't want anybody calling up here whining about doing investigations, because you investigated Hillary Clinton upside down, sideways. She had 7 investigations, mostly by Republican members, and you didn't complain not one lick about that, and the Democrats didn't whine about that either, so don't you whine. What we seek is the truth. And if at the end of the day he's innocent, so be it. I can live with his innocence, but I do want to know the truth. So we have to conduct these investigations and explore the information that is available to us in order to come to some answer about what's going on. And we got Winnie. Yes, Winnie.
Yeah, how y'all doing
Okay.
today?
Good.
Okay. Did Trump, and I know I heard on CNN they say that the people Democrats they didn't like Trump from day one. They didn't like him. He did a crime for them, impeachment process. He made a crime.
Well, I think he's guilty of multiple crimes, to tell you the truth. And for them to say that Democrats didn't like Trump at the outset, so what? A lot of them didn't like Obama from the very beginning either.
Right.
And Obama never did nothing but conduct himself in an upright, gentlemanly manner. And
Yes.
they still didn't like him, so I don't care anything about that statement. But yeah, so I think he crossed the line, Winnie, and I think your man is in trouble.
Oh, oh, okay. You think that he gonna be You think they gonna remove him out the office?
I think
He gonna stay like Clinton? You know, Clinton has got impeached, but he held his seat. You think Trump gonna be that way?
yes, I do. I think what'll happen
You
is
think he gonna have his seat? He think he's not gonna be removed?
no. I think what will happen is I think he will get impeached by the House, and just like with Clinton, when he gets to the Senate, they will not conduct a hearing in order to remove him from office. But I think it will go down on his mark that he was impeached. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen.
How you gonna run in 2020? Who gonna run in the Republican side?
Well, there'll be
Do he
people.
still run in 2020? Or somebody, vice president will take over?
No, as long as he has not been removed from office, he
He can run?
He can run, even if he's impeached. He can still run. Yeah, he can run.
Oh, okay. That sounds cool.
Yeah, so you get a chance to vote for him again.
Yes, I will.
Okay.
All right, take care.
All right,
Bye-bye.
take care. Steve, how are you?
How you doing, Rudy?
Okay.
Hey, problem one, 39% of the people voted. You're not going anywhere with that.
Right.
And that's not saying I'm a participating American. That's saying I'm a lazy American. And I ran into it last night at a council meeting with our beloved mayor in Port St. Lucie. Well, I caught him in a lie, and he tried to get out of it. Well, you don't get out of one with me. So I'm tired of this in government, locally or federally, just all this lying. They have systems like that Lewandowski guy.
Yes.
I would have had him held in congressional contempt, and he'd have been leaving in a handcuff.
Absolutely.
But they won't do it. And until you take some action, talk all you want. Just talk.
Well, you think I'm going to argue with you. I'm not, because as a person who is a member of the Democratic Party, I get frustrated with us trying to all time be polite and getting punched in the nose and don't punch back.
Right. See, I don't join any parties. I'm not a party guy. I'm an American.
Yeah, well, okay.
My ticket usually looks like a Chinese buffet, all chopped up.
All right.
But this time it's going to look straight Democratic because I've had it.
Oh, yeah.
They're destroying our country. I'm not going to sit by and let it happen after I get wounded trying to, defend this country. I'm not going to let some chicken who couldn't, had bone spurs in the brain, get me, destroy my life, destroy my country, destroy my future for my family.
I don't, Steve. I'm telling you, I used to have some respect for Republicans because while I may have disagreed with them on policy, I admired the fact that they had certain principles that they held on to with family and faith.
Yeah.
But
So we don't.
but no more.
No, there is no Republican Party now.
No, none of that matters anymore. They used to
not at
come.
all.
They used to come to me and ask me, "Oh, you really need to be a Republican?" I said, "Nah." And now it is absolutely out of the question. It wouldn't even be a thought in my brain to even consider that.
No way. No
yeah,
way.
Yeah. So you
No
know.
way. And I tell people, if you don't want to vote, just get ready for a lot more pain.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because you're going to experience a lot more pain if you don't change this government.
Well, I don't understand. You know, people have been hoodwinked, and they don't read. And like you've often said, people tend to be lazy. And the information, my God, is right there. All you got to do is take a few minutes, and you can find out the answer to these things that you accept just willy-nilly that they're not true.
Nothing else, you can go, hey, Google.
Yes,
You know, it's like,
exactly.
who was the first president of the United States?
Yeah.
Everybody will say George Washington. That's not true. It was a guy named Johnson who was 2 years before Washington, but he wasn't, elected.
Yeah.
Washington was the first elected president of this country.
Yeah.
So people don't know their history anyway.
Very true.
And I've heard too many people say, well, I worked all my life, I'm retired, now I'm just going to sit back. And I said, being American never stops.
No,
you have to be diligent all the time, or you will lose what you have, which is independence and freedom.
And you know what? Here's the thing I don't think that they really get, Steve. For old timers like you and like me, it ain't really about us. It's about our kids and our grandkids. Don't you care about your grandkids?
That's what I tell them.
Yeah, you're going to leave them
I told them at the Monday night meeting, I said, we're 50 years in debt in the future because of you guys.
Yeah.
Our grandchildren will be paying it off.
Yeah.
They said, well, you're wrong. It's only 47 years. Oh, whoopee. During that 47 years, you think they're going to have even more tax increases on top of these?
Yeah.
So now they've listed New York, the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah.
That Port St. Lucie, it's one of the better places to live, 143rd in the nation. It's also one of the most expensive places to live now in Florida because of taxes.
Yeah.
Because we have surcharge on our water, we have tax on natural gas, plus a tax on the water, and then the two surcharges.
Yeah.
And then it just goes on and on and on. So it's got to stop. But until 39% of the people go out and get a friend to go vote with them, so you got 70 or 80% voting.
Yeah.
We're going nowhere. We're going nowhere. Spinning our wheels.
All right, Stevie.
I'll let you go.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah. Faithful listener. What we're going to talk about tonight, I don't think I got a chance to talk about it last week. Rural America is hurting. I don't think that I covered that. And we're going to talk about, we already opened with the issue with the president. Then we're going to talk about the prison system. And I did some pretty good research on the prison system. And I think you might find some of it very interesting. And then I ran across an article from Emily Walton, who's a sociology professor at Dartmouth College. And she said all students should be required to take a course in Black history and white privilege. Now, I didn't say that. Emily Watson, a sociology professor at Dartmouth, said that.
Somebody's about to beat you over the head for saying that, and you didn't even say it.
I just want to make it clear that I didn't say it. It's an article. And if you don't, I can give you the date and where you can look it up. But that was her suggestion. I found the article interesting because of the way she went through it and explained it. and she teaches this class in Black history. So and it gives an awakening to many of her students. But let's start with the rural America is hurting. I don't think I covered this last week, but I meant to, so I'm going to cover it tonight. One of the reasons why I think Trump was successful was that the rural America is hurting. And I think he tapped into that. And I think some of rural America is blaming some of us for their problems. But a lot of those problems really don't have anything to do with us, but the changes that are taking place in our country. And it for example, the technology advances that have taken place in our country are absolutely unbelievable in my lifetime. Unbelievable. I mean, when you think about when I graduated from college, there was no thing as typing on a computer. Everybody typed on a typewriter. And electric typewriters were just becoming really popular in the early 70s because for that it was a manual typewriter. And I took my typing tests and my training on a manual typewriter.
Oh, really? Oh, I bet that was excruciating. I did 80 words a minute, but we had electric typewriters in my class.
Yeah, I did. I think I did 45, but we had the manual thing that you went through. So think about that. And the first computer, and Brenda and I were one of the people that bought that first computer.
Wow.
It was like $3,500.
Like the 2000 I paid for my first VCR?
Right, exactly, right, okay? And we got it, at that time, we got a special discount through her company when we were in New York.
Oh.
And now I just bought a laptop to replace my old laptop, and I paid less than $500 for it. It's like 10, 20 times more powerful than that first computer we bought for $3,500.
Wow.
So, as you can see, so what the rural economy is suffering from, and especially at this point when agriculture has been the driving force for many of people that lived in rural America, you now have a lot of corporate farms. So the individual farmer is becoming less and less. And the technological advances are eliminating some of the job opportunities that would otherwise be available to people in rural America. And then the backbone, I have always said, of what makes a community strong is when a community has its sons, its daughters, its aunts and uncles, all in the same community. That strengthens your community. And what we have in many of the rural places is when those young kids go off to college, and I guess it happens quite a bit here too, to a lesser extent now, but they go off to college and they don't come back home because there's no jobs. So you lose that talent that was raised in your community because there's nothing for them to come back to. So, and I think that we have to be mindful of that. And I think our politicians have to be sensitive to trying to create opportunities to improve the knowledge base for those people in the rural communities. Now, the article that I read said that companies have spent a lot of money trying to invest in rural communities, but it's all been for naught so far. But just keep that in mind. I had a little compassion as I was reading through the article and discovering some of the things that they'd been through. I said to myself, wow, that's... And you know, like everybody else in the world, I'm in my own little cocoon, and I never thought about what was going on in rural America. But after reading that, I thought to myself, you know what? We need to be a bit more sensitive about that. You know what, Cliff? We better take a quick break here. And that number is 340-1590. That's 340-1590.
That's the cool thing about talk radio. You get to call in and talk back. 772-340-1590. You're listening to the African American Scene with Rudy Howard. And let me warn you about something. Don't make any assumptions. Don't make any assumptions. Because Rudy does a lot of research. And he brings it with him. So don't assume that he's making anything up. Because we hear a lot of people saying things like that. And we know for a fact. We see him. We watch him. And he does his research. So you're going to have to at least consider what he's saying because he's bringing you something. He's basically reporting, okay? We're going to be right back with the African American Scene. And let me remind you, you can call in 340-1590.
Serving the entire Treasure Coast, Howard Insurance and Associates in Port St. Lucie offers a wide variety of insurance products, along with the very best customer service. Whether you're shopping for the best homeowners coverage at the most affordable value, contact Rudy Howard's team at Howard Insurance and Associates. If you need coverage for your vehicle, call Howard Insurance and Associates, 343-9878. That's 343-9878. Maybe you're planning to add a boat, motorcycle, or RV. Call Howard Insurance and Associates for your free quote at 343-9878 and get the coverage you need at a cost that will fit your budget. For home or business, auto or recreational vehicle, choose Howard Insurance and Associates, 600 Southwest Darwin Boulevard, Suite 206, Port St. Lucie. And for your free rate quote, call them at 343-9878, 343-9878. Indian River State, the home of champions. The World Series MVP Steve Pearce of the Boston Red Sox got his start at IRSC. Pioneer swimmers and divers have been national champions for more than 4 decades. Pioneers men's basketball is the 2017-2018 Southern Conference champion. Pioneer softball is a perennial champion. Pioneers baseball is now guided by Frank Torrey Jr., the tradition of champions. Your IRSC Pioneers.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
Good smell.
And as we always state at the beginning of each and every one of our live and local programs that are recorded for YouTube, views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of WPSL, but those of the program's host. However, you are encouraged to like and share them on Facebook as we return now to your favorite hour of the week. Rudy Howard's African American Scene, heard every Wednesday evening in the 6 p.m. hour, with archives of the show on YouTube under WPSL TV. The time right now, 6:32, Wednesday night, as we resume more of the African American Scene with Rudy Howard.
And yes, let me tell you, this prison system thing we talked about last week, and I think it was Guy that called up. He got a little disturbed about some information I gave him. But did I? Yes, that's where I was at. Oh, yeah, that's where I'm at. I didn't get to the other story yet. So let me tell you about private prisons and the effect that they have on our economy. Private prisons, they receive a stipend from our government. And the stipend that they get is based on the fact that they can house prisoners for cheaper than the government can do it. And on average, they say, the article says, they can save about somewhere between $25 and $50 per prisoner. And that can be a pretty significant savings. Now, how do they do that? Of course, it's cutting expenses.
Is that $50 a week, a month, a year?
Well, I think it's a $50 per prisoner per month. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
So
It's a lot of money.
yeah, it is. I think they calculated based on 1,000 prisoners, it came out to like $144,000 or something like that. Now, how do they do that? They cut expenses, and which means that they hire prison people for less money than what the standard going rate would be at a public prison. Now, if you build a prison, and here we go back to the article I was just talking about, in a rural area where jobs are sparse, you can probably hire somebody to be a prison guard, and it would be a gainful employment for them for less money than it would be at a public prison or a state or federal prison. The other thing that they do is they may cut back on cleaning expenses so that the prisoners are apt to have a less clean cell or less sanitary environment in which they're staying in. So that's how they do it. So it is, in theory, the idea that they can save the government money. Now, here's the interesting part. Now, in this prison system, prisoners have to work. Most prisons demand that you work. And you can make anywhere from 86 cents to $1 an hour. Now, here's the problem with this, okay? They are making this money, and the savings are not passed on to you. Let me identify some of the major players that use prison labor to rake in profits. Whole Foods. Whole Foods uses prison labor, but now, for full disclosure, they stopped using prison labor in April of 2017 because of the controversy created for having been identified as using prison labor when they're generally considered to be a socially conscious company. McDonald's uses prison labor, and they're guilty of purchasing pantheons of goods produced in jail, including plastic cutlery, containers, and uniforms, all produced by inmates. Walmart is another company that uses prison labor. What they do is they purchase the goods from jail farms. Now, I don't know if anybody saw the program that was put on by Lester Holt, and he talked about the need for prison reform. One of the forays that he made at the jail was to go out into the farmland where they were farming vegetables, picking vegetables, and that was that part of their job. Victoria's Secrets uses prison labor. Now, I know that surprises you. Now watch this, though. Here's one of the things. One of the things that they were doing was taking the made in Honduras tags off the clothes and putting on made in the USA. 2 prisoners were placed in solitary confinement for telling journalists that they were employed to complete this job. AT&T uses prison labor, and they use prison labor at their call centers. Now, in case you didn't know it, I think some of you probably have from making phone calls. Call centers are notorious for offshoring personnel for call centers, moving call centers to different countries. And Lord knows I am one of the least prejudiced persons in the world, but I have had people on the phone and I'm trying to talk to them and they couldn't talk to me. And I was like, okay, you got to get me a supervisor. But AT&T uses call centers. BP. If you'll recall, when BP had the big oil spill, 4.2 million barrels of oil that went into the Gulf Coast, and here is part of the tragedy. They used almost exclusively prison labor to do the cleanup, while there were many people in the community that were unemployed. They were saving a nickel again. And to me, that seems to be a bit unfair. Now, I'm sure the prisoners were glad to be able to get out of the jail and have to be able to move around and do that work, but not fair to the people who live in that community. Starbucks is another one that uses prison labor. Microsoft uses prison labor. How about that? Nintendo uses prison labor. And finally, American Airlines uses prison labor for their call centers. Now, how do I feel about prison labor? I'm not really, I don't really object to the fact that companies use prison labor, but I do have mixed emotions. Those mixed emotions come from the fact that most private prisons, who are one of the main ones that use prison labor, have to sign, governments have to sign a object to minimum occupancy clause. They have to sign a minimum occupancy clause. There's where I have a problem. Now, the minimum occupancy clause, and I talked about that last week, can be 90%. So if my prison is less than 90% full, then I have to pay money to the prison system for not having enough bodies. Now, while I fundamentally don't object, I think that creates a dangerous incentive when it comes to prisoners. So that minimum occupancy clause is a concern for me. I don't have a problem with our government saving money, but if they're paying prisoners 75 cents, 85 cents, 95 cents an hour, why isn't that savings being passed on to us? Why not? How come? And let's make this even more so you can understand it. I want you to grasp this. You're paying the cost of them being in prison, which means you're paying for their health care, their food, their upkeep, their care, and that's coming out of your tax dollars. And then they're making a bunch of money, and the profits for the companies keep going up. The wages are not going up, and then they tell you they need a tax break. Something about that just doesn't sit well with me. Now, I know there's some people out here going to call up and try to attack me about that. There's no attacking me about that, because if you are making those kinds of savings, the theory that was promulgated by Ronald Reagan of trickle down, there should be some trickle down, and there's no trickle down. It's just they save money, they make more billions and stuff their pockets a little fatter, and then the people who need the money are continuing to struggle. And let me tell you something else. The next major crisis, it is a crisis right now, but the next visible crisis that we're going to hear more and more about is housing. There's a lot of homeless people out there, and it is very, very difficult to get out of a homeless state when you have fallen into that trap. And I think I've talked about this before, but once you're in that pit where you're homeless, and it may not be of your own accord, you could have, in some cases, I know when I did the show with Carebag, you had women whose husbands left them and the kids high and dry. And they had a big, beautiful house, and all of a sudden now they're sleeping in a tent and getting up and going to work. Now, the thing that surprised me was that these people get up and go to work every day, and some of them go to school every day, and they're living in a tent. Wow. But we have to do something about that. We can do something about that. I think one of the unique things that I think it was done out in Oregon or somewhere out there, Seattle, they made a community of tiny houses. And they gave homeless people an opportunity to live in those tiny houses. I saw that has always been in the back of my mind, that I'd love to be able to do that here, where we could put a tiny house project together. Some of those houses only cost $15,000 or so, and would give somebody a chance to not live in the street, and would give them a place to take a shower and have an address that would help them get a job, because one of the problems is you got to have an address to get a job. So just keep that in mind. So when I'm talking about these things about the prison labor, I'm talking about the total effect on us as a society as a whole, and what we can do to try to help our fellow human beings to become successful.
Well, you have to have an address if you want a bank account, and if you get a job, you got to have a bank account. How are you going to cash your check?
I know.
You know?
I know. It's
it's difficult.
You're caught in a trap. And here's one of the things, and I learned this from Roxy when she was on my show. Okay, you're now at a point, you got a job, okay, you're trying to get your first place. Now, she said there's some landlords out there that will work with you, but you got to come up with your first month's rent, last month's rent, and security deposit.
And a utility deposit.
That was what I was going to
That's
next.
next, right?
If you haven't had utilities, you got to have a utility deposit.
And if you want a car, guess what? You got to buy one, make payments on it.
There you go. So all of a sudden now, it could be anywhere between $4,000 to $6,000 to get out of that tent and get into a rental apartment. There's people that own houses that can't come up with $6,000 like that. So now, and that's not counting the furniture, the bed, the linen, whatever, you know. And I know in our church, about 2 years ago, a lady came to us and she was hurting, and a whole bunch of church members got together and we gave her furniture, beds, and blankets and pillows and whatever. So just keep in mind. So don't be so quick to judge, because anybody, if you have some bad luck, could be in that situation. And the other one that I know about was somebody that got hit with an astronomical medical bill, and they lost everything. So, okay, so my last topic for tonight is this college professor, Emily Walton. She's a professor in sociology at Dartmouth University. She has suggested, now this is going to get some of you going, and if you want to call again, that number is 340.
And you're running out of time.
Yes.
340-1590.
Yeah, well, we've only got about 10 minutes left.
Yeah.
She has suggested that all students should be required to take a course in Black history and white privilege. Ooh, that word, white privilege. Boy, that just made some people's hair on the back of their neck stand up. And she has said that she feels it's very important for the growth of individuals that they have a broader understanding of people in their society.
That's kind of balanced, though.
Yeah, it is. I think she just says that there is some real life discovery that happens to the people that take her class. And we have Greg and Stewart. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hey,
Good
Greg.
evening, Cliff. Good evening, Rudy.
How you doing?
Good. Pardon me, just getting over a cold. I have an associate that recently came out of the prison system that worked on the not furlough program, but the in-house work program where they made.
Yeah.
It started, I think, at 72 cents an hour. When they left, their last 6 months or so was $1.15 an hour.
Yes.
And they were actually appointed a position outside of the walls before they left. And, you know, as a minimum wage position, but, you know, coming from that situation, they were relieved to have any support at all.
Oh, yeah.
And they did manufacturing there, he did manufacturing his entire 8 years being institutionalized.
Yes.
He left with a small check and a reference to a shelter where he could start anew and a job reference where he could start anew. So it's a good program, but it sure costs the taxpayers a lot of money.
It does. It does.
It costs him a lot of money. And he did leave from a for-profit prison. He didn't leave from a federal prison or a state prison. He left from a for-profit, privately owned prison. And, you know, when you hear the words for-profit, you got to believe that the operators of that prison are not doing it out of the kindness of their heart, but at the same time, they did provide him a good service. And I'll take your guys' comments on the air. Thanks for taking my call, and it's good to talk to you again.
Good talking to you
All
too,
right.
Greg. Yeah, I think that's an awesome call, and that's one of the other sides of that argument too. Is that, you know, he picked up some skill, and that skill ended up helping him get a job, and that's good, because that's what we want. We want people to become productive citizens after they made a mistake, because all of us can make a mistake. You know, I was with some people the other night, and I said, you know, some of us can be pretty sanctimonious, but I can tell you, I grew up, and I was a really good kid, but I know people that did some really stupid stuff that could have got them in prison, but the Lord was looking out for them. And
looks out for drunks and fools.
Right, exactly, you know. So anybody can make a mistake, but, you know, That's a really good call, Greg, and I'm glad you said that, and you just actually elucidated my point by saying he was making 72 cents an hour and $1.21 an hour when he got out. So now, what she says is, in this, why she feels it's important that people take this class. She said that society needs clarity on race. And what she says, we've experienced on this show many times. When you pull up a topic of purely about race, people are very, very reluctant to talk about it. And I think more so they're reluctant because they're fearful that if they express their opinion, that they will be criticized for their opinion about race. Well, you know what? If you don't ever say how you feel, you might be surprised. You might have an opinion about race that I haven't thought about that might enlighten me and make me think a little bit differently. And likewise, I might give you some information to think about that you never thought about that might make you think a little differently.
And you need to be open to that possibility.
Absolutely, yeah. So you can't be afraid, and that's the part of what she's saying, that, you know, people have to be willing to have the discussion. And then finally, I think, not finally, but on this particular point, it is harder to dislike people you know. You know, you can say, I don't like people with red hair. And then you meet someone that has red hair and you go, by God, that's a good guy. So all of a sudden your opinion about people with red hair, your opinion about people with red hair is kind of dumb. Because now you met somebody with red hair that you like.
Remember that song called Short People Have No Reason? Remember that?
Yeah.
It was making fun of racism.
Yeah.
And they sang that song until people started becoming ashamed of themselves, too.
Yeah.
They saw what the message meant.
Then the other point that she makes about the need for clarity on race, and the other one that she makes is lifting the curtain on white blindness. So, you know, that's a word. When you say white privilege, boy, that just gets some people so upset.
Yeah, and then some of us, a few of us white guys, kind of wonder, what the heck are they talking about, white privilege? We've never experienced that. I've never experienced that. But then again, it needs to be opened up, because I love the Black History Month stuff when February comes around.
Yeah,
I love that.
Well, see, you say you've never experienced that, but you have, and that's part of what she does, is explains to people how they have gone through life and never understood the fact that by virtue of the fact that their whiteness has allowed them to avoid some of the things that are indigenous to black folks on a routine basis.
So I basically missed out on that part. But yeah, I see where it exists. I just haven't been able to apply it to myself yet.
Yeah. Well, it is, and I don't think it's, you know, some people look at it and they say, well, you say that, and that's a really negative connotation toward me. No, I don't think you've had anything to do with it. You just happen to be white, and because you are white, there's some basic advantages that you've had that other people haven't had. That's not your fault. You didn't create the difficulties other people experienced in growing up, but there is a advantage that you've had, and that's the point that she tries to make. She just tries to say, listen, don't take for granted that you have, and you're a good person. Okay, I got it, but that doesn't keep you from having experienced white privilege. Now, I have about 3 or 4 friends that on Facebook who are white, and they have, all 3 of them have said, I get it completely. You don't even have to tell me. they get it.
Well, I get it because of the history that's taken place.
Yes. Well, and it's because it's not a personal attack at you. It is just the way things exist, and but understanding that you have had that advantage opens your eyes. She talks in the article about a letter she received from one of her students who thanked her, and how her class opened her mind and her eyes to things in the world, and I guess she said she was 2 years or 3 years out of college and took the time to write her that letter. So I don't know. I think that might be a good idea to have a mandatory course. Now,
Well, they did it with Americanism versus communism back in the 70s in the high schools.
yes, they did. Yeah.
We had to have an understanding.
Yeah, they did. They made us do that. So I think it'll be. You know what? When Superintendent Landon was here, I don't know what happened to the project, but he had a project where he was integrating all the history books, and he had proof that it has a positive impact on the school systems wherever they implemented that plan.
We need a positive perception of it all is what we need.
Yes.
Okay.
I would like to thank you so much for listening to the African American Scene. God bless and be safe, and I will see you next Wednesday right here for the African American Scene.
The African American Scene with Rudy Howard is presented by Howard Insurance in Port St. Lucie. Archives of this show can be watched on YouTube, even this one. So if you were on the show, be sure to watch YouTube for the next few days. Go to WPSL TV on YouTube for archives of Rudy Howard's African American Scene. And this is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast, celebrating over 25 years and counting.